Hi everybody, welcome to Chapter 5 of Money in Schools, where we're really going to be looking at budget planning. The argument that I'll make for you as we look at the chapter drivers really is that this is probably the most important chapter that you're going to look at in this book, because this really says the concepts of what a budget are, what people do, and I think this is applicable to higher education and also to public school education as well. You're going to see a lot of overlap between what I talk about for Money in Schools to what I spoke about in budgets and financial management. But I think these are important concepts, and I can guarantee you that knowing this stuff is going to help you a lot as we're looking into the midterm for the class as well, because this is where a lot of these concepts are you're gonna see them again, and I also think this is going to help you when we're looking at what you're going to need to know for your final projects in this class. So it's going to be, we're going to look at it from K-12, but we're also going to look at it from the district level as well. So these are big ideas and these are district level ideas, but I think that's important, you know, in conjunction with what some of you are doing with site-based management that is obviously slightly different. So we know that schools are looked at much differently now in today's era than they were pre-2000. Everybody feels like they have input over what should be spent, who should spend it, and the budgeting system becomes political as well. There are good elements of that, there are bad elements of it, but one of the problems and one of the struggles that we see is that then you have to be much more transparent, and you have to make sure that you set the priorities that people see and people need to see. So when we're looking at the concepts of a budget, you have to understand that they are political, and political decisions are going to be made that impact how you budget and what you budget for. So all that a budget is a description of what a good education program looks like. It's an estimate of what's needed to carry out a program and what revenues are available to meet the expenses that you think are necessary for a school. Budgets are normally done on a one-year period, but you'll see in strategic plans that budgets can be 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years as well. So I think you need to know the next few slides. These are the different types of budget models that you're going to see in school. So I would pay very close attention to this, and I would make sure that I understand this as well. So the common approach to budgeting, you're going to have to know all of these. These are your 6 approaches, and you're going to see a similar approach presented in your budgeting for higher education book as well. So incremental budgeting basically means you're going to take whatever happened the prior year as a base, and then you're going to either increase or decrease the percentage of what is needed to run the school. When you need something new, potentially, you know, an entire set of computers or an entire curriculum, you have to determine if the percentage increase or the percentage decrease is going to be enough to supply you what exactly you need in that educational setting. That tends to be the challenge, because when you get money, that's good, but in order to get it, you probably have to cut from somewhere else. Line item budgeting is when we basically take everything and we put it into functions. And we say that A, B, and C are the functions of schools, and this is the point of our budget, and because of that, that's where we're going to assign our responsibilities, and it's where we're going to assign our money. We know that this is common, but we also know that administrators do this so they can be transparent and say, this is where the money is going, and this is why the money is going to A, B, and C, and why it supports a specific initiative at the school level. So our textbook mentions something called planning, programming, and budgeting evaluation systems. This is something that is a newer model that you might see in your school settings, but it's one that the authors, Craig Wood in particular, is very much into, because it looks more at needs identification and then using the budget to show how you're meeting needs and why you're meeting needs. Do I think this matters? Yes, because this is really looking at the political aspect of budgeting, because you're doing a needs assessment and you're justifying why you need to spend what you need to spend. And then the district can determine if it's an appropriate need or if it's not an appropriate need. And that in itself really can help with the whole concept of budgeting itself. So zero-based budgeting, this is very, very, very common throughout the state of Florida. I've seen this a lot in Oklahoma as well. This is basically saying that everybody has to rank priorities and then come up with alternatives for those priorities. That can create a lot of controversy, but it also is important that you as potential managers understand what that looks like and how that can impact you, because you are going to have to set priorities when you're budgeting. You're going to have to say if item A or item B is more important than item C. It takes a lot of time to do this, and you're not going to have a bunch of money that's at your disposal to spend, but by doing this, it can at least tell you that we're starting everything on zero and we're going to rank the considerations in order. School site budgeting, I'm a firm believer in this, especially in Florida, because in Florida we're looking at school sites. We're looking at different budgeting efforts. It's decentralized, it's done at the building level, and the teaching staff has voice on it. We're going to talk about this in Chapter 12 of our textbook. You may agree with this, you may not agree with this, but I think understanding what school site budgeting is can only help as we look at the budget system. Outcome-focused budgeting is what our federal government wants us to do. This is when you basically tie how much money you're spending based on assessment and based on performance. Our textbook says that this is new, and it is new. It is not common in education right now, but I guarantee you, if federal control takes over in our school system, you are going to see this model more, and you're probably going to experience it sometime in your career. So know right now that outcome-focused budgeting exists, it's going to exist, and if there's more federal control in schools, you're going to see this all over the place. So, what budgeting framework works? I don't have an opinion, because people will ask, well, which one should I use? Well, it's really county specific. If you're working in a smaller district that has more autonomy, if you're working in Hardee County or Flagler County, you really probably can get away with incremental budgeting. But think if you could actually use incremental budgeting in Orange County with the number of schools that they have. Larger districts, line item budgeting probably would work better. If there's a fiscal crisis and you have to cut, then you probably want to use zero-based budgeting. So to answer that question that inevitably people ask, what budgeting system is the best budgeting system, I honestly think it depends on where the district is, the size of the district, and the demographics of the district. So budget models should be built locally. Yes, we are in a state where the state is going to have more autonomy and input over budgeting, but in order for that budgeting system to work and be effective, you have to look at it from a local perspective as well. But revenue building isn't necessarily always local. It can be at the state level or the federal level, but in our minds, we want to think of budgeting as a local process and look at budgeting at the local level. So at the local level, we look at revenues, programs, expenditures, and then we attempt to balance the budget. And if we can do that, then we've definitely accounted for the budgeting process at the local level. So first thing you do, you look at what the tax progression is locally. The state will normally do this for you. They'll use the state aid formula, and then the local sector can adjust based on where the state money comes from, and also based on people that move into a county, or move out of a county, move into a district, move out of a district. But federal aid comes in later, and it is going to be tied to specific programs. At the time of me recording this video, my guess is that federal aid in this state is going to come in STEM, and it's going to come in special ed. It's always going to come in special ed. That's not changing, but think about where federal aid is coming from, consider it, but don't depend on it, because federal aid could easily go away before you even get it. And if that happens, we have a problem, we have a major problem that we really can't avoid. So one of the things you have to do is envision where your educational programs are and where they're going to go. If you have a magnet school that's focused on science and technology, then you have to focus on those programs and how the budget and how the money and how the expenditures are going to go for those programs. You want to look at what is protected in the current system and in the current program and give opportunities for future budgeting when necessary. And that's a big idea as well. So the first thing you need to do is look at personnel costs. You will find that 80% of what you're spending is going to go into your salaries. It's a cost determinant. If you're paying people a lot of money and you can cutting salaries and cutting people is the best way to put more money into your schools. That's a very blunt way to put it, but it's also a true way to put it. If you have too many people that are up at central administration or too many people at the building level, you need to cut, and that's one of the things that you have to consider. Then you think about things like extracurricular activities, new curriculum, new textbook, auditing, legal fees, security, but that's something that you want to think about after you've considered everything else as well. Balancing for the budget, you basically need to align estimated costs where you can. Sometimes the state will have more control with classroom units, basically saying that, you know, for every 1,000 pupils, we're going to get 55 professional positions. Then you just follow the state model and you adjust a little bit more, a little bit less is needed depending on your building in your county. But when that happens, you're left with a lack of autonomy because you're not making the decisions necessary to impact the budget in your building. So there are 3 types of revenue: increased revenue, static revenue, and declining revenue. We will briefly look at each one of these as we're discussing this in the context of money in schools. So I'm a cynic. When I see increased revenue, I truly think dream on. My belief is when you have extra money, spend it. Because if you don't spend it, you're not going to get it the next year. But you could bank it if there's something long-term that's needed. But you have to determine the way that your organization handles increased money. My advice is that you use it for ways that can improve the school and improve the conditions for students. Giving a 0.5% raise to all of your teachers, that might be great, but is that something that's going to be sustainable, or is it going to be something that's actually going to be anything more than a pittance? Giving your teachers an extra $30 or $40 one year isn't necessarily going to be something that is going to help in the long run. Static revenue is what we see in our schools. Most of the time, our districts receive the same amount of money year after year after year after year after year, and they're always going to receive that exact type of money. The issue and the problem and the challenge happens when there are increases in salary because of a contract, when the cost of healthcare increases because a new president comes in and changes the healthcare system. And you have to worry about these things as a school leader and as a district leader. Declining revenue, where will we see this? You'll see this in a district that's losing population. The great thing is we're in a state that is not losing population. We're in a state that's growing. When a district is losing population, the first thing that you're supposed to do is reduction in force. That basically means you cut jobs and you cut positions. But the thing is, when you do that, look at the consequences that come with it. Class sizes increase first. Instructional materials are lessened. The amount of paraprofessionals that people have access to are lessened as well. But it's something that happens, and it's something that happens more in districts with declining resources, declining populations, and you have to be aware for those changes and those challenges. So we're going to talk about some ways to improve measures in school districts. I'm not going to give you really specifics on many of these, but I want you to think about how all of these could help improve costs and improve how you spend your money at the district level. So the first thing that you can do is do this energy efficiency model. In newer school buildings, you should create the school building to be energy efficient, but if you're in an older building that's historically been there from the 60s or 70s, that's going to be different. One of the things that we've seen throughout the United States, more so in California and Arizona, is this notion of 4-day-a-week schools. And you close the schools down on Friday, don't have any employees report on Friday, and universities are doing this as well. We're seeing this happen a lot at the university level because the universities have to be open on Saturday anyway. We've talked about that in the higher ed part of this class. But you also have to think in mind that you could also do this in public school as well. So more efficient purchasing. If you are working with a smaller district or smaller county, you could do what's basically called cooperative purchasing, meaning that spend extra money, purchase a surplus of products, and share with the other district. When you buy in bulk, you reduce costs. So if you're buying curriculum that can be distributed between, for instance, maybe Flagler and Volusia County, you're going to use that and you're going to spread it across, and it's going to help both of the counties, and it's going to cost less in the long run. So that's a good idea, and that's something that can absolutely help the school district. So if you can defer costs of equipment and maintenance to try to get funding later, if you get the funding, that's good. But if you don't get the funding, that turns out to be a horrible thing, and then you have a long-term cutting of staff. Most of the time, when you defer equipment and purchases and maintenance till the end, it ends up with a reduction in staff, because then when somebody retires, you use their salary to fund and pay for that, and then you just have a reduction in force, and you don't replace the teachers. So our textbooks say the district should hire a business manager. In this state, yeah, I mean, we're operating on a county system. You have to have a business manager in place. You need somebody, too, that could potentially have expertise and experience in grant writing, because grant writing is going to help you as well in the long run. And I think cash management really offers an opportunity for that, and having somebody who understands grants can only help a county that's working with multiple high schools, multiple middle schools, multiple elementary schools work. Risk management, this is always a very controversial issue and something that you need to consider, because you could reduce the costs of insurance. You could self-insure, but if something happens to the building or something happens to the district, everybody loses. There's no real true way to fix this. If something goes wrong, you're kind of left at the mercy of whatever happened, and that can be a major challenge and a major problem. You can do competitive bidding for insurance. Once again, if you do that, then you're looking at probably the least effective insurance, and could that impact personnel? Well, that's a possibility. So you have to assess the cost-benefit of that model where necessary. If you have long-term debt, and this is something that's big throughout this state, refinance where possible. And if you are able to refinance, do it. And if it can reduce the long-term debt, you want to refinance and you want to keep it. You want to keep it with a lower interest rate. Remember that what you're capable of doing for 1 year might not work the next year. So if you can reduce the interest rate, you almost always want to do that. Northeast, where I'm from, we offer employee retirement incentives. Because we have these higher paid teachers that are making close to $90,000 and $100,000, we just kind of buy them out and say it's time to retire. Florida does this with their drop system, and it's an incentive for employee retirement as well. And you can replace with individuals that make less money. That can be a good thing. So sometimes districts have to do salary wage freezes and increase insurance costs. What happens when you do this, the morale of the employees decreases. Some of them decide they want to look elsewhere, and this can decrease their productivity as well. So try to think about that in terms of what that will do and what it looks like. So once the budget has been determined, the superintendent approves it, then the school board approves it, and then it's normally published at some place, probably at the local newspaper or even at the county level, and community members can give their feedback, and then the budget is either finalized, completed, or not completed. So that's it. We're going to look at all of this information again from higher education, and then the next chapter in the textbook is probably my longest lecture, because we're talking about budgeting for personnel. So when we do chapter 6, I'm really focusing on a long presentation. It'll probably be about 30 or 40 minutes, and it's something that I'm passionate about and I think is important. So if there's anything else that I can do to help you with this information, please let me know. Thank you.